Any questions or comments about anger that you came up with over lunch?
I was angry with oil in my lunch.
You were angry what?
Oil.
With the oil in your lunch. Right. Yeah, just disliking is not the same as being angry. But it's a precursor. It can be a trigger. Yes?
So only we are anger with the other human beings than the nature and the trees.
True, true.
Animals.
Yeah, primarily our problem is anger with other people. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I was angry with the cook.
Yeah. Yeah, and the big problem with anger, I mean, one of the big problems with anger is that, well, one, we're not happy. Like, we want happiness. We want kind of enjoyment, well-being in life. So, I mean, at the moment we're angry, it's impossible to be happy, right? Because we're focusing on negative aspects of ourselves or another person, whatever the object of our anger is. We're focusing on a negative aspect and then exaggerating the drawbacks of that, the dissatisfaction or the disturbance that brings us, and then wanting to push it away or destroy or harm it somehow. So in that moment, it disturbs the mind. It makes the mind, our own mind, like unhappy. Another problem with anger is that because it causes us, it disturbs the mind, that it inhibits our ability to think clearly. So it makes it more difficult to find a resolution to the problem, right? The thing that is disturbing, the thing that is we don't like, then how to change the situation so that we can get what we want. We can't think clearly about that because the mind is disturbed and in a kind of heightened state of disturbance. So it's difficult to think rationally about what would be a good solution, how to bring about a positive outcome from the situation. And then our mind is unhappy, and then also anger leads us into speaking and acting in ways that are harmful to others, which destroys friendships, destroys relationships, destroys work relationships, so that it makes it difficult to communicate and difficult to work and interact with people in the future. If we act out of anger, then people are nervous when they don't want to be around us again. When they are around us, they're kind of, it's like they're walking on tacks. They're not sure what's going to provoke us, what might set us off. They're afraid that we might, if they do something, we might react in a way that's going to, that's going to be hurtful to them. So then people tend to close down. Especially you can see like with children. Children of parents who get angry a lot, then they just they don't say much, they can't act natural, they just act in a very contrived way around the parents, so that, because they don't want to provoke their parents, and they're not sure what's going to provoke their parents, right? So anger, then it makes people around us be closed off to us, and kind of minimize their interaction with us. Just like when we're around other people who are angry, we're not comfortable. So it's difficult to be at ease, it's difficult to enjoy ourselves. So when we're angry, not only we're unhappy in that moment, but it makes other people around us unhappy. So it destroys friendships and destroys and limits our relationships. So also, physically it's bad for us. When we get angry, it weakens our immune system, and it causes heart congestion, heart failure. Actually, there's many studies done on the effects of anger on physical health, and it showed the more instances of anger and the longer they last and the more strong they are, people are more prone to have congenital heart failure, more prone to have high blood pressure, hypertension. Also, generally, they're more unhappy, and also they have less. You can see by common sense they have less constructive relationships with friends and family, which causes more isolation and more loneliness, which leads to depression, which also weakens your immune system. When we're unhappy, we feel weaker, no? When you're happy, you feel full of life, full of energy. When you're unhappy and feel lonely, you feel kind of weak and kind of not healthy, which actually reduces your lifespan in the long run. Makes you more prone to sickness. So there's studies that show that people that are more lonely, have more depression, then they're more likely to die at a younger age. So it's clearly the anger has an ill effect on our health and on our relationships and so forth. So let's do a little meditation on anger now. And so this is analytical meditation. As I was explaining yesterday, there's two basic types of meditation: placement meditation and analytical meditation. So the first meditation we did this morning when we're watching our breath is placement meditation, because we're simply placing our attention on an object and trying to keep our attention there. So now this meditation we'll do on anger is analytical meditation, which means we analyze. We involve critical thinking. We ask questions and then draw on our experience and draw on things we've heard, draw on our own kind of reasoning ability, our own power of observation and thinking about things to try to gain deeper insight into an issue. In this case, what is anger? Right? That's the question we started off with this whole discussion. And trying to define exactly what do I mean when I say, I'm angry, another person is angry, or anger is this. What exactly are we talking about? Anger. So the best place, the best resource for understanding what anger is, of course, is our own experience, right? But we can't just, so we'll try to, when we meditate on anger, in this way, we try to relive situations where we became angry, but then kind of step back and act like a neutral observer and see, how did it feel? What are the thoughts that came to mind? How did I react? What kind of things were my triggers that did I react to? How did that experience of anger arise, and how did it pass away? So we'll analyze anger from many, many, many different kinds of perspectives, asking many questions of ourselves in relation to our past experiences of anger. But let's ask, I'll try to, in guiding the meditation, I'll try to just, there's infinite different questions we can ask about the experience of anger. But in guiding the meditation, I'll just try to refine it to, say, 3 or 4 questions that are all related to the big question of, well, what is anger? What are the different characteristics and defining properties of anger? So remember, at the beginning, I said there's typically in the text there's described several defining characteristics. So with each of them, we'll just ask, is that true or not? Right? For oneself, is that true or not? And relate that to your own experience. So one is that maybe the first, one of the most interesting questions, is every instance of anger is preceded by some kind of attachment. Attachment to being treated a certain way or not being. We can also be attached to people not treating us a certain way, right? Attachment to something, somebody acting a certain way, someone, doesn't have to be someone else, but the situation being in such and such a way. Usually it's the way people speak to us, the way they look at us, the way they treat us, the way they regard us, the way they speak about us to others, things like that. So is it true that we have some kind of attachment? We desire things to be, we have an expectation that things should be a certain way, and then someone acts in contradiction to that, goes against that. So is that always the case? And then I'll repeat these as we go through the meditation. We'll maybe spend about 3 to 5 minutes on each question. So is it the case that attachment always goes before? Is it the case that anger always focuses on something negative? Right? A negative aspect. When we're angry at a person, are we always focusing on a negative aspect and exaggerating that? So, and is it the case, similarly, that a negative judgment always goes before? That this person did that, and that's bad. Then we place a value judgment. That's bad. And then in relation we get angry. They're speaking like this, they're acting like this is bad. Does that always go before anger? And then at the time we're angry, is that we're always focused on those things that we see as bad, that we see as negative. Right? Does anger actually always focus on those? And does it exaggerate those? And then maybe the third question, this is a statement I just made now, that at the moment we're angry, we cannot be happy in that moment. We're always unhappy in the moment of anger. Is that true or not? So maybe that's enough questions, I think. So, okay, so get comfortable in your meditation posture. And then without asking any more questions, just try to analyze for yourself and see what you think about these things. So when we do analytical meditation like this, there's no foregone conclusions. It's not the case that you should end up thinking like this. Rather, you should leave it, really sincerely, when we really sincerely ask a question, we don't know what the answer is going to be in the end. We're trying to look at our own experience and use our own reasoning and see what is the truth. If we assume that we know what the truth is beforehand, then there's really no point in asking, right? Then we've already come to a foregone conclusion. So here, really try to ask sincerely, what is the case? Okay, so get comfortable in your meditation posture. Take your legs, your torso is erect. Shoulders broad, open, hands in your lap. Chin slightly tucked. Eyes directed down towards the floor. And then we'll draw your gaze a little bit. Lips and teeth in a natural position. Tip of the tongue just touching the roof of your mouth. And then gradually gather your attention inwards. And then again, just refresh your positive motivation. Why are you doing this activity? Why are we engaging in this meditation? You know, somehow, in some form, to bring about the welfare, the benefit of ourselves and others. In the long term, in the short term, and in the long term. And especially to reduce the suffering of ourselves and others by reducing afflictive emotions like anger. So generate a positive motivation. And then we'll generate some concentration by watching our breath for just a minute. Right? Try to focus the mind. Just looking at one object. You can take the process of reading. So for 1 minute, just try to focus your attention on your breath. So before we turn to the main part of the meditation, the analysis of anger, I should probably just add, because it's after lunch, we all just had lunch, We're sitting down, it's kind of hot outside. So we're definitely prone to become sleepy, lethargic. So if you do find yourself becoming sleepy while you're meditating, then there's a couple antidotes. One is look up. Just look up for, not straight up, but kind of up high, especially if there's lights. Then, let a little more light come into your eyes, just for a few seconds, and then bring your gaze back down. That can help lift the mind up. Also, you can take a few deep breaths. Helps lift the mind. Also, you can try to engage more strongly with the object of meditation. Can help lift the mind up. Or, and a fourth thing you could do is visualize. If you need to, you can close your eyes and visualize very bright light in your mind. Or try to visualize a very bright light in front of you, just for a minute or so. And then that can help kind of wake the mind up. Okay, so let's look at our first question, a very big question is, what exactly is anger? When I talk about getting angry, the mental experience of anger, then what do I mean? So we'll just look back in your own life at different experiences. First of all, when you become angry at someone else or something else, and it's easy, there's all different shades of anger, right? There's kind of red hot, blazing, like a huge blazing fire, very strong anger, which is easiest to identify. So start with the very strong, most obvious instances of anger. But then there's kind of a scale where there's kind of middling anger and then very small kind of anger, irritation. So look at the most big, strongest, obvious examples first, and then look at the more mild instances of anger and try to see what are the common characteristics throughout all of those that define them as being part of the same thing, part of anger. Right? So take about 5 minutes. Look at by sort of reliving different experiences of being angry, and try to define exactly what is anger. And then we'll turn to other questions related to those. Okay? So about 3 to 5 minutes. Looking at what exactly do I mean by anger. So then another question, in addition to what is anger, we can try to continue trying to define anger. But is any instance of anger always preceded by our desire for something, our attachment to, or our wish, or expectation that something be a certain way, that someone treat us a certain way, or that we act in a certain way, or that things happen in such and such a way? Do we always have something we want, some desire, some form of attachment, some expectation, and then the opposite of that happens, right? Somebody acts in a way that's contradictory to that, or we act in a way that's contrary to that expectation, and thereby we get angry. Is that the case? So look at different instances of anger, and in every instance see, was there some kind of expectation or desire preceding that, or some expectation preceding that was contradicted? And then a related question that fits in nicely here is it possible then by changing our expectations, by reducing our attachment or altering our expectations, what we, reevaluating what we want, and if it's reasonable to want that or expect that in that situation, is it possible we can reduce our anger then in this way, at this juncture? That we can eliminate or reduce the likelihood we become angry by altering our expectations in that kind of situation. So then another question to look at is it the case that any instance of anger, any mind of anger that we have, is always focused on something negative? Right? So if we're angry at a person, at another person, is it true that we're always focused on something negative we see about the person? And does that blind us to seeing anything positive to them? Is that true or not? Or similarly, when we have anger at ourselves or at an inanimate object, are we always focused on a negative aspect? And do we exaggerate that? The negativity of the thing we're focused on. So think about that for a few minutes. Look at your experiences of anger in the past again. And then just a couple more questions to think about for a few more minutes. This will be the final section of the meditation. So is it the case that when we have anger, that we always want to hurt or push away or destroy and be separated from the object of our anger? So if we're angry at a person, is it the case that we always want to somehow harm them or get them away from us or out of our life? Right? To push them, or we always have aversion to them. Or if we're angry at ourselves or angry at an inanimate object, is it always the case that we want to somehow kind of harm or distance ourselves from or destroy the object? And maybe at the same time we can also think about, is it the case that whenever we're angry, we're always unhappy in that moment? In a moment of anger, are we always unhappy? Is the mind always disturbed and unhappy? So think about either or both of those questions for a few minutes. relax your attention now. We'll end the meditation. Yeah. So as you gradually relax your attention, then yeah, if there are any, I don't know, did you have any kind of new insights? So the purpose of this kind of analytical meditation, like we do it this way, is to gain deeper and deeper insight into a topic, right? So remember yesterday I was talking about how this kind of analytical meditation is part of a three-step process, where it begins with just learning about hearing, or learning about a particular issue. So in this case we had a discussion, we learned about a little bit about what anger is, what isn't anger, what are the uncommon features of anger that distinguish it from other kinds of attitudes. So we learn a little bit about, and then we think about, talk with others, or think about for ourselves, and come up with our own examples, our own way of understanding the issue, in this case anger. And then we look deeper into it and relate it more closely to our own personal experience through meditation, and try to get deeper insight into actually what experience, especially experiential kind of insight into what, in this case, whatever the issue is, in this case, what anger is. So, I wonder, did that work this time? Even though it's in the middle of the afternoon after lunch, did you get any kind of insights into, or any more clarity about like what anger is? Or any of these questions? What were the questions we looked at? Is anger always preceded by attachment? Is it always focused on and exaggerating negative aspects or negative qualities of the object of our anger? And are we always unhappy at the time we're angry? And what was the other one altogether? The last set of questions.
Do we always harm or want to harm or distance ourselves?
Oh yeah, distance ourselves from or push away the object of our anger. Yeah. So did you get any insight to those questions, or anything else about anger during your meditation? Anything you'd like to share?
Just have
Yes.
a question.
Sure.
Would you feel like suppressing anger, is it helpful or is it goes against, or it builds on?
Well, it depends what we mean by suppressing anger. What is suppressing anger? In your
Let's say something that you want to express, but you kind of withhold from doing it. It kind of builds on, and it kind of the intensity increases because of that.
Because you're not expressing it?
Yeah,
That probably is not healthy. But there can be different reasons for not expressing something that you see you don't like, right? About somebody's doing. I mean, like sometimes when we feel that if I say this, this person's going to get angry, I'm going to get angry, and it's going to end up really messy. In that case, it could be wiser just not to say in that situation. But if you can find a situation where maybe that person would be open to hearing what you have to say, and they wouldn't get angry, then you try to be skillful and find a way and a situation where maybe the person would be open to hearing that. In terms of the other person, in terms of your own mind, also, if you see something somebody does and it really upsets you, and in that moment you feel really angry about it, you feel really like really worked up about it, really irritated about it, really disgusted, and highly kind of emotive about it, and you're not thinking clearly, it's probably better not to say at that time. But if you think about it, take a couple of hours or a couple of days and think about what they did, what happened, and you still feel like, I need to say something about it, I need to do something about that. Try to get your motivation really clear. Like, why am I bringing it up? Why am I confronting this person with that? And really try to have a wholesome motivation, not a wish to hurt them or provoke them or belittle them or embarrass them or something. Not out of vengeance or retaliation, but really with a wish that you see they're doing something that's harmful to themselves and harmful to others, and maybe harmful to you, and you really feel like it needs to be addressed. This needs to change. So if you really have a positive motivation, then say from within that. But if you see that you're about to speak from just out of irritation and disgust, then it's not a good motivation, right? So you'll just be creating negative karma, and it probably won't have a good result. It'll probably have disturbing result. So in your own mind, try to have your motivation very clear and positive and kind of well-reasoned. And also look for opportunity when you might have the best possible effect and result in terms of the other person. Right? When's a good time to speak to them about it?
Yeah, saying something to improve what they're doing or what is expected of them, I think it's required. But yeah, it should not be out of anger, but
True.
out of the desire to improve things.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really difficult. I know I just had an instance where we had a bunch of guests visiting our house in a monastery where there was a teaching. And we have a library, a very nice library in our house. And someone, a friend of mine, he's quite hot-tempered actually, he borrowed a bunch of books. He borrowed like 5 books, to study, and I helped him find the books, and he borrowed the books. And then a few days later he was done with the books and he returned 4 of them, and he said the 5th one, well, he's not sure if he borrowed another one or not. So then he asked me to check, if he borrowed this other book or not. And sure enough, he had. And he said he can't find it, can't return it. So then, he checked among his things and the things of, some other people who might have borrowed it. And he said, oh, I can't find it. Can I just give you money for it? Just give you money for the book. And I said, well, no, we'd rather you replace the book, actually, not just give me money. Because he gives me money means I have to go and do the work of buying the book again, which is actually the value. It's much more valuable than just the money, right? But then he got really irate that I suggest that he replace the book. He's like, what do you expect of me? Da, 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 da. So, but I felt like, it's important at this point to make a stand, to try to take a stand and say, no, I mean, you borrowed the book. It's your responsibility to return the book, not just return some money. So you try to think of a solution whereby you can return the book. Either you find it or you find a way to replace it. And so yeah, I mean, I felt like it was fully justified to say that, but I tried to say it without being, like, I hate you or, you're a terrible person or anything, but just say, look, I think this is a principle that is true that I think you're not respecting, you're not kind of taking seriously. And then, gradually, actually, he found the book and returned it. But yeah, I think sometimes it's actually more helpful to the person to not just be nice, but rather stand up for what you think is right, and if you think they're doing something that's not correct, to just face them with that, even though it might upset them, in the short term.
But sometimes you're in a position when you're vulnerable. For instance, my neighbor upstairs, he went and banged into my air conditioner, and all the gas came out.
With his car?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I sent him a WhatsApp message saying that when you park your car, please be careful because the banging into the air conditioner, I think the gas has leaked out.
Right.
So he wrote back saying it won't happen again, blah blah. Then when I called the urban track people to service it after 2 months, I said, man, there's no gas in it. So I could refill it, 2,500, apart from the charges of servicing it. So it came to 3. So I sent him a note saying that this is what's happened. And you please do rectify. He says, I'm traveling and I think it should be given to Mr. Shetty, who's my neighbor. Now why should Mr. Shetty get that note? He never banged into my car, into my air conditioner.
Right.
So I wrote back saying, you banged into my air conditioner. That's why I sent this to you.
Okay.
After that he did nothing. He kept quiet. And I talked about it to Rob. And Rob said, look, you're in no position to start, a kind of disagreement with him.
Yeah.
First of all, he's a very disagreeable person.
Yeah.
So he said, just don't leave it alone.
Yeah, it can be. That can also be the best solution in some cases.
Because he's not stupid.
Yeah.
Why should poor Mr. Shetty get the bill? He never banged into my air conditioner.
Right.
And he may be traveling or he may be in mid-air, but he's the one who did it.
Right.
So he should take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And he thought just having said that it won't happen again is enough. And then on my birthday, he and his wife sent me on long greetings.
Okay, the story this is long enough. We got the point. Okay.
What I'm saying is,
We didn't get the point?
when I was in no good position,
Yeah.
to start a fight with him.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, but sometimes just leave it, no? Just leave it.
That's what I did.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
got 2,500 Khor.
great. You offer to him. And your air conditioning works well now? I hope. Hot season is coming.
Use it at this time of the year.
Okay.
So it's summer.
Okay. Yeah, any other insights? Any of you got some insights from your this little meditation? Yes?
I'm talking of personal, I mean, probably this is why I'm here today also. Somebody elder to you kind of, I don't know, I don't want to talk about the reason why, but maybe something that they've done, a really elderly person that you kind of feel bad about initially, but they keep repeating that behavior and eventually you start getting angry about it.
Yeah.
And the anger like builds up and before you know, it's like 10 years of anger and which unfortunately converts into hate, which is a very negative emotion.
Yeah.
You're aware. I'm aware that I'm not supposed to hold on to it. I'm not supposed to let these emotions do what they're doing to me.
Right.
But it's very difficult, despite of the awareness, to do something about it. Like just now you were talking about how one should confront the other person and probably put it across in a polite way.
Sometimes, not always. No.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes the person, like the other person, is really not receptive. So we have to probably bring some changes in ourselves.
Of course.
So that whatever they're doing doesn't affect us, at least from here on.
True, yeah.
So, I mean, it would be really helpful if you can tell me how to go about it, like so that whatever they do, whatever actions, I mean, in any way they want to harm me, or I'm assuming that they want to harm me, how do I get out of this whole negative...
Yeah, so, there's several different junctures where we can kind of intervene with the whole, anger is a process, right? There's a whole process to how we become angry. Like this gentleman mentioned, usually it's some of the triggers are like if we're tired, we're overstressed, we're overworked, if we have low self-esteem, we feel defensive. I think Subhashini mentioned we feel like powerless. Then those are all things that contribute to us reacting like with anger. If we feel threatened, then one is those are all kind of the precursors to anger. And then, as another woman mentioned back here, we have some expectation, that people should act in a certain way. So one thing is just to, the first set of kind of conditions is to, get enough sleep, make sure we're not overworked, make sure we're kind of relaxed, and not to, as much as we can reduce those kind of things. But then, those are quite tangential things, really. That's not really the main thing. But one of the main things is we have expectations that people should act in a certain way, people should behave in a certain way. That's a big trigger for anger, right? So, and there we can do a lot of revision. So, especially if there's, the kind of situation you're pointing out, like with someone senior, we expect that they should treat me a certain way. Well, is that really, if they were like us, that would be a reasonable expectation. But so often other people, we don't really know what's going on in their mind. We don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know what's going on in the past. We don't know what's going on with them in the present. So other people, a lot of times they have a lot of, just like we probably feel we have a lot of challenges that we face that our friends and family don't know about. There are our own personal challenges that we have to deal with. And especially, people who don't know us well, people if, from another family or something, they don't really know that we deal with those challenges. Just that way other people are exactly the same. Other people that, we might find kind of, detestable or we dislike them or unpleasant or, offensive in some way. What's going on in their mind? What's going on in their life? Do we know? So we're quick to judge, but we don't really know. We don't really have the basis for, knowing what's going on with that person. So, so on the basis of that, we can revise our expectations. Is my expectation for the way that person should treat me okay in terms of just a normal person in normal society? That might be a fair expectation, but do I really know what's going on in that person's life, in that person's mind? No. Thereby, do I know that my expectation for that person's behavior is really fair or not? Also, no. So that brings a lot more flexibility to what, other people, they could be just a very angry person, they could have grown up in a very angry family, very little love and affection. They might just have a lot of confusion themselves, they might have very low self-esteem, they might, live with a spouse or live with parents who are constantly belittling them or, mistreating them in some way. They might have cancer, they might have, be totally in debt but trying to hold up a facade outside. Who knows? And there could be a million and one things that are really make that person's life really difficult, and that comes out as treating me in a way that I really don't like. So, thinking in that way, kind of what's going on below the surface can help us, generate compassion for that person. That they might be under the control of so many other extenuating circumstances that I don't know about. Another thing is just looking at, asking this question: does my responding to them with anger, does that actually change the situation at all? Does that prevent them from treating me, especially like in the example you mentioned, where it's happening over a long term, and you see that you're angry and angry and angry, and then turn to hate, develop hatred for this person? Is that changing that person's behavior and reducing the behavior? No, it's just destroying your own happiness. No? So if you see that clearly, then, of course, in that moment when you see that, it's difficult to feel like we can change, because it's a sort of a way of reacting to that person that we've been habituated to over a long time. Of course, we can't change, but give yourself at least as long as you built up the habit. So if you built up the habit of reacting to that person over 10 years, give yourself 10 years to just walk it back, and react in a different way. Don't expect that you're going to change. But being aware of what's going on and starting to give attention to and analyzing it is the first step, right? If you're never really stop and think about it clearly, like, how do I feel about this person? How do I react to this person? Then there's no change possible, right? So just being more aware of it, and even though that can be very painful, because it can, we have to go into like feelings that are very unpleasant and thoughts and aspects of ourself that are very unpleasant that we don't really like. And we don't want other people to know about, actually. But we have to be kind of courageous and just face it, because it's kind of like, that's the only way to get rid of it, Unless we see the dirt in our house, we're never going to clean it out. It's not nice to go in the corners of the kitchen and see there's cockroach poop here and ants all here. Nobody wants to see that. We don't want other people to see that. But if we never really go there, then we never really get clean. The stuff just remains stuck in the corners and just gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. So it's like that with our minds too. If we don't really have the courage to go to the kind of unpleasant and painful places in our own mind, then we can't really do what's necessary to kind of clean it out and improve, become a better person. So it also helps to have the confidence that we can be a better person, that we can change. Right? So there's other kinds of meditation to do to make that more clear to us. Like analyzing to see, what is the nature of mind itself? And are any positive or any afflictive, like any thoughts that I have, is there any thought I have that always remains in the mind, in my mind stream all the time? We can easily say, no, all different thoughts come and go and come and go, just like clouds passing through the sky, birds going through the sky. But the nature of the sky is just clear. In the same way, are there any emotions, attachment, jealousy, anxiety, joy, greed, anger? Are there any emotions that are always fixed? They're always, because if they're of the nature of my mind, then they should always be present. But we can see, all those emotions, those judgments, feelings, perceptions, they all arise, pass away, always arise, pass away. So the nature of my mind is just like the sky or pure water. It's just clear. So becoming more aware of that can have us bring us confidence that we can change. No matter what kind of negative state of mind we have, it's not something that's fixed and part of our being. It's not like we are that. It's just due to certain causes and conditions, that attitude has arisen and arises maybe frequently, but it's not fixed and it's not like it can't change. So it's possible to change. And then another thing is that, just seeing how we're unhappy. Our reacting with anger and resentment and hatred, actually it harms us the most. It doesn't change the other person, and it makes us miserable. Right? So just recognizing that can give you a real resolve that I need to do something to change. I need to react in a different way. And just give up the expectation that that person's going to change, right? We can't control the way other people act. So we have to find a different way of reacting to that person. So that's where the last thing we're going to work on, loving kindness. And then we can also add compassion. It's not in the title, but where that comes in, to responding, instead of responding with irritation and disapproval and dislike, responding with loving kindness and compassion. And then and the more we practice that, the more that we become habituated to that, and the more stronger that attitude becomes. And that can be very, very helpful. And that's why, that's one of the reasons His Holiness Dalai Lama is so famous in the world, is because he's experienced this extreme suffering of being expelled, having to flee one's homeland, seeing one's so many millions of people in one's homeland killed and oppressed, and one's way of life, especially this incredible, precious kind of religious, very wholesome religious, society of where it encouraged so much meditation and developing really positive qualities of the mind, having so much skill, developing extreme positive qualities of the mind, concentration, generosity, compassion, kindness to an extreme extent, and seeing this whole kind of culture not completely destroyed, but largely destroyed, and then having to protect it in exile. So suffering so much, but still not responding with anger, and not responding with the wish to use violence and retaliate, but rather responding with kindness and compassion, and still be willing to have dialogue and try to find a peaceful solution to this incredibly tragic situation. So it's because of this attitude of compassion, basically, that in His Holiness' ability to put that into practice in a very real life situation, that's on this world stage, that he's one of the reasons he becomes such a famous person, leader in the world, despite being, the leader of a small exiled, 6 million exiled people. It's not like it's a big thing in one way. So, so those are kind of the ways to do it. Look at how the anger affects you. See if you can reevaluate your expectations, and then try to rehabituate the way you react to that person. Those are kind of three main things to kind of work on. And also have confidence that you can change by looking at the nature of your mind. Right? One thing I saw when I was meditating, one thing in conversation over lunch, I think I already mentioned that. There's one of the qualities of anger is it always makes you unhappy. In that moment of anger, you can't be happy at the same time. Another thing I think because it's helpful often to contrast, to understand any state of mind, to see if it has an opposite, right, and to contrast the opposites. So the opposite of anger towards a person is loving kindness, having concern and affection for. Loving kindness, it looks at the positive qualities. In terms of, because I was contrasting anger with attachment before, so not to confuse you. In terms of, if you contrast anger with the opposite afflictive state of mind, attachment is the opposite. But if you contrast anger with an opposite positive state of mind, then loving kindness is the opposite. Because loving kindness is real concern and wishing for the well-being of someone else, for yourself or another person. So one thing when I was meditating, it became a little more clear to me how I think one characteristic of anger, you can see, there's this big question, how to distinguish anger from just like sort of dislike or disapproval of a certain behavior. Anger at a person versus, disliking or disapproving of a certain behavior that they engage in. Is, I think, with anger, it undermines your ability to be concerned about the person. If you get angry at a person, there's a tendency to feel like, I don't care what happens to that person. Whereas if you dislike something a person is doing, and you forcibly react to that, but you don't have anger, it doesn't undermine your ability to care about the person. You can really respond strongly to something that you think they're doing wrong, but well, if you're angry, then it's like it leads you into feeling I don't like. Not only I don't like that person's behavior, I don't like that person, and I don't care about that person. So there's no love for them in your heart. But you can still have, like with a parent with a child, you can really have love for the person in your heart, but you really don't, you don't like a certain behavior, or you feel like you need to address a certain behavior in a kind of, in a strong way. And it doesn't undermine your caring about that person. Like I can see in the example I gave about this friend borrowing a book, then I checked my mind after he became really angry at me, and I was quite making a strong point to him. Then afterwards, I look at my mind, because I did get a little heated, but and I really tried to make a point of like, no, it's not that I don't care about him. Check my mind, but also try to shape my mind, because you don't want to slip into anger. That I don't care about him or I don't like him. I mean, I don't like this behavior, but it's not that. He's still my friend. It's not like I don't care about him. Rather, I'm trying to make him see something that I don't think he sees. That the way he's sort of taking us for granted, or taking me for granted, just kind of using me in a way that I feel is unfair. So, but that's, I mean, of course I don't like it, but it's not that I don't care about him, or I feel like I don't want to, be his friend anymore. I don't want to work for his welfare at all. But rather, can still care for it. But in order to make a certain point, I need to act a certain way in this situation. So, yeah. So anyway, the thing I think I saw a little more clearly was I think when we're really angry at a person, it undermines our caring about them, our concern for them. Then that's a very clear sign that we're angry. Is when our concern for them is kind of eliminated or reduced. Any other questions or comments? Savashni and then. No, you go ahead.
His Holiness, whom you quoted just now, has a lot of compassion, etc., etc. But I don't think he's all the time sort of wishing, whatever his name, Ling or Ping or whoever is that.
Xi Jinping.
Right.
Yeah. The Chinese Prime Minister.
Yes. I don't think he's all the time, pouring loving kindness on him. He may be feeling it. He may be,
Sure.
not disliking him. But I don't think there is this tremendous bond forming between them, because that guy is not doing anything. He's fighting with us, saying Arunachal belongs to them.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So, it's nothing great that he has annexed Tibet, because there was a lot of calm people and they were not doing anything which was aggressive towards China.
Yeah.
He wanted that region because it was strategic or whatever.
That was Mao Zedong. I was already Mao Zedong.
The point is that this loving kindness is intellectual.
Yeah. Yeah, well, loving kindness doesn't mean you have this incredible bon ami and you're great friends with someone all the time. It's more a sense of concern that you're wishing for their well-being.
But he's not wishing for his well-being.
You don't think so? I definitely think His Holiness is wishing for the well-being of all sentient beings, including Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping.
I'm not saying he wishes him.
But it's not like all the time he's thinking, oh, I wish he'd be well, may he be well, may he be well. Nobody's saying we should be like that. No. But that doesn't excuse you from caring about some people.
I don't think he's bothered about it. He just feels sad that he's behaving in that manner, because he is himself a very forgiving and good human being. But I think that because he's good at changing that Ling thing, whatever his name.
Yeah.
He's going to be what he is.
That's true, yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about loving. We haven't even started talking about loving kindness yet, have we? You haven't finished yet?
Yes. Even that whistleblower of coronavirus, he was told by the police, shut up. Why are you spreading this rumor?
Okay.
And now it has spread tremendously in China.
Yeah.
It's affected people in Thailand,
Yeah.
Japan.
other countries.
So, even people not telling the truth about a horrible illness like that,
Yeah.
that whistleblower,
Yes.
sort of asked to shut up.
I see.
The poor man died.
Yeah, people act like that. I mean, that should be no surprise. Yes?
Yeah, with respect to one of our participants' question,
Yes.
so that one we see most of the time in samsara. That is like, people are there in a particular relationship with their parents or husband and wife or children.
Yeah.
So they face like, in an abusive relationship for a very long time.
Sure, yeah.
So you give the antidote telling that anger is a process. When you're seeing whether the other person is angry, and you need to be aware that, they might be angry because of certain mental afflictions or their
Sure.
sufferings.
Yeah, yeah.
So always, first step to solve the problem is you have to start generating that love and kindness, right? But again, we also have to.
Is this a question or?
No, I'm just trying to connect to whatever she said,
Okay.
and I wanted your viewpoint on that.
Okay.
So there are people who are, they want to taking the solutioning whatever you've given.
Yeah.
That is, you have to be loving and kindness towards a person who is angry. Also, we should know how to react to that particular situation. But again, what people, they sometimes they take away that, okay, even if they are, treating us in a very abusive way, it might go to a higher level of physical abuse also.
Yes.
They might, that won't work out, right? So it's better they
No.
come out of that particular situation.
Yes.
So that should be the,
True, yeah, yeah. That's true.
like how our holiness, like in China,
Yes.
how they abuse most of the innocent people. So the best step what he could do, he left his palace and he came out. He didn't see about his status or
True,
like his
yeah. He
ego.
could have well just stayed there and
So
been
you
like, oh,
have
this
to
is.
build that confidence if it's too abusive more than 10 years. Like for a man, you just have to come out of that particular situation.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah. But we don't know what her situation is. We're just.
So I'm just like,
You're
many
just-
we have heard like that.
you're
But
just
still they take
speculating.
the pain and they stay. And they
Yeah.
blame on
I
the
can
other
only
people.
guess who the person is.
Yeah. Anyway, we don't need to get into
Because
people's
Indian
personal.
family structure.
Yeah, yeah.
All the interpersonal
Okay, Subhashini. Okay,
dynamics.
okay. It's time to take a break now, actually, right?
We're having a break. Yeah.
Okay. So now we take a 15-minute break and then we resume at 4 o'clock with loving kindness.